And we're live. Alright. Nathan, get us started.
Hello, welcome to trial day 2 of the defendant. Let's get this party started.
The defense call your first witness, or second witness, I suppose.
No, that's my line. Defense, call your second witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Colt Carlson to the stand.
Alright. Yeah, Colt Carlson, Marshall Carlson, steps up to the stand. Yeah, and he sits down. Pleasure to see you all.
Yeah, good to see you.
Witness, will you state your occupation for the record?
I am a federal agent, U.S. Marshal Colt Carlson.
So you are employed by the federal government.
Yes, I'm employed by the federal Washington government.
Could you describe your relationship between yourself and law enforcement here in Briarstone?
I function largely in the aspect of training new enforcement officers here, as well as tracking down interstate bounties or anyone who might be trying to evade the law.
So you have how many years of experience do you have with examining potential talent in law enforcement and public service?
That I've only been doing for maybe a decade.
A decade. Okay. Thank you. Could you describe? You were placed in charge of monitoring the defendant by then Chief Inspector Barrett. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Could you describe what you believed the purpose and purview of your mission to be?
From what I understood when I was assigned the mission in the first place, it was to determine the guilt of one John Reid, to see if he is in fact guilty, gather any evidence relating to the death of Duke Barrett.
So your job was to shadow Mr. Reid, gather evidence, and try and figure out if he was guilty of the crime he was being accused of.
Yes, that is true.
So you were aware prior to you joining the group that Mr. Reid was under suspicion of a crime, of a heinous crime.
Absolutely. He was the chief suspect in the investigation in the death of Duke Barrett. This was confirmed, I believe it was in Tumbleweed, when he confessed to me personally.
Yes, that is what it says in your report, and the defense will not attempt to contest that. When you learned eventually that it was the party's goal to travel into Confederate territory and rescue a Mr. Benjamin Knight, who had been alleged. Yeah, it is a pretty cool name. Who had been allegedly.
It is in fact a cool name.
Who had been allegedly captured and kidnapped by the Snakebite gang. Is you had learned this correct?
Yes, I did learn that.
What was your reaction to that information, especially considering that it was your job to tail the defendant?
He shakes his head a little bit. I initially advised against the decision to go into Confederate territory, knowing the dangers it would pose to all of us, myself included. That being said, my jurisdiction does not stop at the border. I have jurisdiction over all of the federal land. So if there was a crime being committed, it was my duty to get in there and help prevent it.
Yes, that makes sense. So you were concerned about potential risks to yourself and other members of the party, but you figured that if there was a crime that was going on in Confederate territory, that it needed to be put a stop to.
That is correct.
Okay. You mentioned briefly in your testimony, and pretty extensively in your report, that the defendant confessed his involvement and his planning in the murder of Duke Barrett. Could you describe the circumstances under which that confession occurred?
Yes, it was very shortly after y'all had left the train in Tumbleweed. I
The
believe
infected
that
train.
was the infected train. I believe that was covered in previous testimonies.
Yes.
Mr. Reid came up to me, separate from the rest of the party, and confided to me that he did, in fact, murder Duke Barrett. Confessed to the assassination of him.
Did he ask anything else? Did now you say he told you this? Did he talk about anything else? Did he ask you any questions?
No, he did not. I informed him that would change his situation in this trial, that the trial would no longer be proving his innocence, but uh, essentially where we stand now, death penalty or not.
Okay. Yes, that sounds about right. After the defendant confessed his guilt to you, did you have any reason to doubt him?
In his guilt,
Yes, that his confession was perhaps false or unwarranted.
I did not have any reason to doubt him. He was not under any duress at the moment.
In her testimony, in earlier testimony, uh, Jade Barrett, the former chief investigator, testified that she did not arrest the defendant during her confrontation with him because she didn't have enough evidence to pin the crime on him. Now that you had a confession, why did you not elect to immediately arrest the defendant and take him back to Briarstone for trial?
My mission had been to follow him until he returned to Briarstone to gather any and all evidence of wrongdoing. That
Oh,
did not, there was no stop on that for if he confessed to the crime. There was
okay,
also
yeah.
several extenuating circumstances that took place.
Well, my question more along the lines of is more along the lines of, if you had believed Mr. Reid to be a danger to those around him, or any citizen that you were charged to protect, would you have arrested him?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading question.
Yeah. Say it again for me. I'll see how leading it is.
Did you believe at the time that John Reid was a clear and present danger to those around him and the people you were charged to protect because you heard the confession?
I did not. Not at the time, no.
He answered it. That's fine then. I can't do anything if they answer it.
He did rephrase the question, Your Honor.
I did.
Sure.
Your Honor, permission to treat the witness as hostile?
No.
Your Honor, for what reason?
Your Honor, the witness we called to the stand is acting in opposition to the defense, with the understanding that the defense wishes to act in the benefit of the defendant John Reid, whereas what?
At this, like, Joseph is like,
Rhodes stands
I
up.
would like to
Your
point
Honor,
out that the other defendant lawyer, the guy, is also gesturing the "I'm dead" line, or maybe he's got a very weird itch on his neck on account of the cold.
What?
Your Honor, I don't see any way that the marshal here is being contradictive in any way.
and
No.
Your Honor,
treat him as hostile.
and Your
I
Honor,
agree.
one of the main reasons that the defense has called Marshal Carlson here today is because he has several direct observations of John's good character and several of his actions have recognized that good character. So the defense does, although leading questions would be nice, the defense does not consider the marshal to be hostile.
Yeah, he seems chill.
All right. So, continuing on with our line of questioning, Marshal. Now that you had Mr. Reid's confession, were you concerned to any greater extent than you were before with the difficulties that might come with extracting a potentially uncooperative John Reid from Confederate territory?
Not more so than before.
Were you afraid that Mr. Reid would use the Confederates to mask himself or to escape your supervision?
That was not a concern of mine, no.
Why not?
Mr. Reid, despite several slippings during the time I spent following him, did, for the most part, stick with me. He did, after all, invite me into the group. After his confession, he seemed to be less of a flight risk than before.
Now, you mentioned that there were a few slip-ups. Let's try and talk about those. Were there any times when you allowed the defendant to act independently without your supervision?
I believe there was a handful of times. Firstly, at a doctor's office, he had full medical privacy there. Secondly, when attending a soothsayer, I offered to remain outside, but he invited me in anyways.
There, you mentioned in your report that there was a time in Dreddtoo when you allowed the defendant and one member of his party to exit the city and go walk around, and the defendant was gone for the entire night. Was that correct? Is that correct?
That is correct. I did allow to separate then. The member he had gone off with, I believe to be trustworthy, to bring him back. Yes, that's the case.
And the defendant did return to your supervision after that?
Yes, the defendant did return to my supervision.
Were there any times when the defendant acted independently without first notifying you?
Yeah. I believe I have 4 listed reports of that occurring in my reports.
4?
Yes. Would you like me to go into further detail on these?
Yes, please, witness. That would be great.
Yes, I believe first occurred in White Ridge. A number of times there when he snuck off in the middle of the night. At the time, I was asleep. I was under the impression he was as well. I believe he put some pillows under the covers, making it look as though he was still asleep.
Aww.
Which I found mildly childish, but still aggravating. To my knowledge, he snuck off to tail several other members of his party.
How did you how did you become aware that the defendant had snuck off? Was it just because you pull off the covers and pillows are there and you're like, oh well?
He would to answer your question, Mr. Donnelly, roughly an hour and a half after the fact, after he had left the building, he returned quite loudly and woke myself and the other members up, alerting me to the fact that he had been absent.
So he was stealthy enough to avoid your detection while leaving, but he came back loudly.
I believe he may have.
So when he returned from this excursion, he did not make any attempt to conceal himself to you or to his party.
No, we did not. I believe he had already met up with those of his party who had left earlier that night, so they were already aware of his being out.
Did you make the defendant aware that such excursions were not allowed after
I did,
he came
yes.
back?
This was not the first. This was the most recent occurring of this. I did make it clear to him this time that he could not sneak away. I don't understand how you gentlemen run your party normally, but while I was there, that could not fly.
How did the defendant react when you said this to him?
Sheepishly.
So did he apologize? Did he look embarrassed? You're saying?
I believe he was embarrassed. I would say more in the act of being caught than in doing something wrong, but he did not make that much effort to conceal himself being caught. In my opinion, it just slipped his mind.
Okay. Did he apologize afterwards?
I believe so.
Okay. This was in Whiteridge. Let's go back a little bit to the purpose of the party's visit to the Confederate territory. Their confrontation with the Snakebite gang in Middleton. Prior to entering Middleton, were you aware of the influence that the Snakebite gang had there?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Were you involved in making the plan to rescue Mr. Knight from the Snakebite gang?
I believe I did weigh in on the plan. It was largely concocted by the members of the Defense Council. I did assist in some aspects, largely just warnings. What could and could not be done under the banner of the law.
All right. So you gave advice as to what would be permissible for the party to conduct to make sure this rescue operation went off.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I have some tactical experience in performing raids such as this.
So you mentioned earlier in your testimony that you had 10 years of expertise training law enforcement officers. There's something that you mentioned in your report that strikes me of particular interest. You chose to deputize the defendant, Mr. Reid, prior to the raid on Middleton that would eventually result in Mr. Knight's release. Why did you choose to do that?
I believe it would give us a greater chance of success in the action. Rescuing Mr. Benjamin Knight was a just thing. He was clearly being held there against his will. I believe it was fully within the law, the confines of the law, for me to assist in his rescue.
Okay. So, but again, but witness, this was after Mr. Reid confessed to the murder, right? You deputized him after he confessed.
Yes.
Okay. Could you, witness? Could you describe the legal authority that comes with being being deputized?
Absolutely, I can. When I deputize a man, I authorize them to perform the functions of essentially a member of the law. Uh, Typically, this is done in order to, as a marshal, I typically have to work in obscure rural areas where there may not be a large presence of police or law enforcement. So I might have to gather together a group of people to track down a bounty runner or some sort of gang of criminals nearby, which was the situation here.
So even after you heard Mr. Reid's confession from him. So after you heard Mr. Reid's confession from him, you still found it appropriate to give him official power?
I believed that it would be more. He would most likely carry himself better, acting under an official banner rather than as himself.
Okay, so you suspected that it would improve it would improve Mr. Reid's countenance and ability to do good if he served under
Yes.
someone else.
While the badge does grant you several provisions under the law, there are also a number of requirements that go with it that are not held by your average bounty hunter. I wanted to impose some of these onto the group to prevent some more of the heinous acts that were possible.
That seems entirely reasonable to me, Marshal. On one last question on the subject of deputizing Mr. Reid, the defendant. In your professional opinion, as someone who has trained law enforcement officers for over 10 years, how did Mr. Reid perform while he was executing the office of Deputy of the Law?
I believe he performed fairly well. He willingly leapt into danger in order to save those who needed saving. I will say he was a bit reckless at times, such as climbing on top of a moving carriage to fight with a snake lady. That was a bit reckless in my opinion, but possibly necessary, given the situation.
Would you describe this reckless endangerment as heroic?
I might say that. While I might not say it was entirely necessary, I would say it was very brave.
Thank you, witness. One last question. The defense has one last question for you, Marshal. When you first made your way to the rest of the party from Briarstone by just accompanying Plateau Joe and the defendant, and you met up with Patroculus and Illanapi later. When you met up with Patroculus and Illanapi, was there anyone there besides those two?
Yes, there was. Young gentleman by the name of Mikasi. I believe he was a member of the Dreddtoo tribe.
And how would, when you arrived there, how would you describe Mr. Mikasi's countenance? Did he look angry? Did he look sad? Did he look happy? How would you describe it?
He seemed in good spirits. I will say he did seem a bit malnourished and like he had just been in a fight, but that was not my concern at the time.
Let the record show that the individual known as Mikasi, who has been described, was not in fact a member of the Dreddtoo tribe at this time.
I believe
Cool.
that is correct, yes.
Let the record show it.
Would you like me to elaborate on that defense?
Please do, witness.
Yes. Later on, when we were in Beach 2, I spoke with the chief there, Mr. Illanapi's father, who described to me this man Mikasi had been excommunicated from the tribe for multiple crimes committed within the tribe. At the time, he had no active bounty on him in Bristol, though.
Did the chief elaborate on the on the crimes that Mr. Mikasi had been accused of?
The chief did go into some detail, primarily that he had done a fair share of information trading, in particular with the Snakebite gang, which led to destruction of a large portion of their tribe.
So in a more official sense, we could label it as assistance with terrorism. Accessory to crime.
He kind of shakes his head at that. The crimes I discussed with him were not terrorism. It was more wanton destruction. The Snakebite gang seemed to come through with the intention of looting and rescuing him, not to inflict terror. These were the things I went with. I went over in a conversation with the chief on these topics. Let him know his options and what he could be accused of. The primary accusations were aiding and abetting in the destruction of a portion of the city.
I'd say that's pretty close to terrorism.
Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Patroculus is not the speaking defense right now. I would like him to keep his reactions to merely objections, not full questioning of the witness and a back and forth conversation.
Agreed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I guess then there's one last question. I lied when I said that there was one last question first.
Fuck. Just one more thing.
Please do not lie to the court. That is that one bad word. I don't remember what it is, but it's
Your Honor,
contempt.
Respectfully, Your Honor, this wasn't written on my notes.
Perjury.
I just came up with it.
It's called perjury.
Witness, you mentioned earlier that you found success in improving Mr. Reid's behavior by placing him under some official structure. Were there any other things that you noticed during your time with him that improved his behavior?
Now, to speak plainly to the court, when he was in good relations with, at the time, Plateau Joe, currently Joseph Donnelly, Chief Defense, he acted much more calmly, rationally than his usual self would indicate. That being said, there were a few incidents involving that.
Describe those incidents.
There were on a few occasions, again in White Ridge primarily, in which he had a falling out with one Joseph Donnelly, which led to contention in the party, including, but not limited to, a number of outbursts of anger. Only on his part, you seem to be well in control of your emotions, Mr. Donnelly, but Mr. Reid seemed to be displeased with something. I'm unclear on what exactly this dispute was over, but I could tell it was contentious.
What did the defendant say he wanted to do as a result of this anger?
The defendant demanded that we return to Briarstone immediately for his trial, in lieu of any of the current defense counsel joining him.
So he wanted to go back to Briarstone for his trial instead of moving on to Timber Trail, where he encountered another issue that he helped with.
That is correct.
I'm so sorry. Could you describe the nature of this issue?
This is much more than
witness?
one more question. But
I know. I misread my notes.
Yes.
You gotta get a handle on those things, man.
I really do.
The defendant asked me if we could go back. Said that he would go back with or without any of the rest of the party members. One Plateau Joe, currently known as Joseph Donnelly, insisted that we go to Timber Trails in order to resolve a potential issue. In the same sense that we went to Middleton in the first place, we decided to go to Timber. I made the decision that you would have to accompany me to Timber Trails due to the pressing threat that could be occurring there, which we later found to be a major threat.
And what was the nature of the threat?
Some sort of man-made vehicle that was destroying a portion of the town.
And did Mr. Reid what role did Mr. Reid play in addressing this threat?
He assisted in the destruction of said vehicle.
If were there civilians in danger from this vehicle at any point?
Yes, there were. Before we arrived, a good portion of the town was actively under attack. Widespread fires and debris. Mr. Reid, as well as his compatriots, assisted in the quelling of that issue.
It's damn
Thank you,
cold,
witness.
alright?
Huh?
Thank you, witness.
Nah.
Yeah.
Illanapi will shoot up very quickly and very nervously look at Joe and say, Mr. Donnelly, Judge, if I may ask one question of the marshal.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
The
Judge?
prosecution will allow this.
Marshal, did my father, the chief of Dreddtoo, make you aware of what Mikasi was initially imprisoned for?
Yes, Mr. Illanapi, your father did make me aware of the crime that he was accused of. It was war profiteering, trading information between the Union and Confederate soldiers, seemingly to both sides.
If I may ask, as a marshal of the law, is this also against the laws within Briarstone?
Yes, that is against the law within Briarstone. We have a neutrality pact with both the Union and the Confederacy at the moment.
If we trade to both sides, doesn't that technically make it neutral?
It makes it twice that. Continue.
Thank you, witness. Then the defense has no further questions.
The defense rests.
It's
Anyway.
your witness, Governor.
Queen of my heart.
Oh, very well. And Governor Rhodes steps up. Marshal Colt Carlson, pleasure to see you here. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask you relating to several of the things that the defense has just asked. Now, you mentioned in your report an interaction with Union soldiers on your way from Tumbleweed to Beach 2. Is this correct? The marshal says, yes, that's correct. Could you please elaborate on what occurred during that interaction? And the marshal nods and says, while en route from Tumbleweed to Beach 2, we ran into a caravan carrying a group of Union soldiers. I believe it was a little resupply wagon heading to the front. Mr. Reid began a conversation with them, I believe, for idle purposes. But the conversation nearly turned violent when several harsh words were said. And Rhodes kind of like nodding at that. Harsh words. Could you elaborate on one particular was brought up? The marshal says, yes, I believe the primary issue was Mr. Reid was defending the state of Briarstone's neutrality in this war, and the Union soldiers were taking some umbrage to this.
Objection: more prejudicial than probative.
Those were words. Sure.
Could the defense please elaborate on that?
No, I think we all understand.
Yeah, Pat, you're going to need to explain that one.
Evidence that indicates prejudice over probative fact, attempting to color.
Probative? Gotta be honest, that's the one that held me up.
Your
probing?
Honor.
Your Honor.
Yeah. Explain.
Probative.
Your Honor. Your Honor. What counsel is trying to suggest is that the testimony that the prosecution is attempting to elicit out of the witness is for the purpose of coloring Mr. Reid's character, coloring the defendant's character instead of describing actions that the defendant took that may or may not be illegal.
Yeah.
I can rephrase my questions. No problem. Could you describe some of the words spoken between these members that led to this incident? The marshal nods and says, as I was saying, the issue was primarily the neutrality of Briarstone. The Union soldiers mentioned some words about the citizens of Briarstone being fairly cowardly for not getting involved in the war, taking the easy way out of staying neutral. Mr. Reid, if memory serves correctly, did threaten violence, did not act on this. He was very quickly pulled away by his party members. The situation was nearly violent, but I don't believe there was any real risk. Had I revealed my position as a U.S. Marshal, they most likely would have let any bygones be bygones. And Rhodes thought, interesting stuff. On to other conversations had here. The times he left your sight. You mentioned there were 4 of these. Most recent of which you have recalled from court. And he said, that is correct, yes. There are 4 occasions on which he evaded my sight purposefully. With these evasions, what do you believe was the purpose for them? The marshal says, yes, generally these excursions that he took were for the purpose of getting private time, I suppose.
Objection: speculation.
That is true. They were not elaborated to me by Mr. Reid, with the exception of the final occasion in which he explicitly stated that he was attempting to follow his compatriots. Follow his compatriots, you say? That's interesting. Why do you believe Mr. Reid?
Objection, speculation.
All right. I will rephrase my question. In your experience, what would be the reason for Mr. Reid following his companions? And the marshal says there could be any number of reasons, as stated. Final one was that he simply wanted to observe his companion. Previous occasions where he was curious about one in particular, Mr. Plateau Joe. As Mr. Joseph mentioned in his cross-examination of me, the case where they both went off into the buffalo fields by themselves. This was I understand there is some sort of connection between the two of them. I believe Mr. Reid was attempting to learn more about his habits.
I'd like to make an objection to a prior statement in the regards of creation of material fact, as John Reid did in fact inform the marshal every time he had an unexcused absence.
The marshal was
Stop.
only ever informed after the fact.
Ooh, got you there.
Yes, but he said he was never informed at all, which is not true.
I said
Let the
I was
record show.
uninformed when they occurred. I was informed after the fact that he had gone out for different reasons each time.
That was
Go to the
particular
tape.
reason.
Back to the question at hand here. Yeah. The defendant seemed to have a bit of an infatuation with Mr. Joseph Donnelly. This is correct. Is it?
Uh-huh.
That is correct to my knowledge, yes. And what might you say would be the reason for this infatuation, this close knowledge that you mentioned in your previous cross-examination, a falling out between the two parties? Did you ever witness anything that might have been the cause of this? The marshal says, well, I did view them getting into... They got heated towards the end, pretty much as soon as they got to White Ridge. They seemed to be having some ongoing discussion relating to a particular event in Mr. Donnelly's past that I am not privy to. I do not believe Mr. Reid was privy to it either. That was the point of this contention. Interesting. And when he was denied this information, how did he react to this, to not being told? Well, he did not react.
Objection asked and answered. We already went over this during my period of cross-examination.
I would request further examination into this subject line, as the defense has a vested interest to keep certain parts of this testimony off the record.
I'll allow it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Continue, Marshal. Could you please describe some of the incidents involving that happened after the fact, after this falling out? Yes, there was an incident. I'm unclear exactly what was spoken, but Mr. Reid stormed out shortly afterwards. For the rest of the night, for about 6 or 7 hours, he proceeded to just absolutely wail on a barrel in a back alleyway. Just kicking the hell out of it, really. A lot of expletive words. I maintained my post during that time, so I did observe most of it. The barrel was paid for by a member of the party after the fact, so no destruction of property there, but the reaction was not a calm one to whatever was said. Interesting. Those are interesting things there, Marshal. So, would you say Mr. Reid is in control of his emotions in general? In my experience, sometimes he is, sometimes he is not. Marshal, when I'm talking to you, I'd like a yes or no answer. Marshal, would you say that Mr. Reid is always in control of his emotions? The Marshal says, no, prosecutor, I would not. And when he is not in control of his emotions, you have witnessed him perform bouts of violence. Yes, officer, I have. Very interesting. On to another line of questioning here. While you were passing through White Ridge, I believe you stopped at a seer, did you not? Yes, yes we did. Prosecutor, we stopped at a court seer in White Ridge. I believe it was your personal seer. And Rhodes says, that is true, that is true. And what could you describe to me what exactly was said in that? Particularly relating to the dreams had by one John Reid. You see the Marshal at this kind of like sits back and sighs.
Objection relevance. How can the dreams of the defendant have any bearing on his character, on whether he is guilty? The defense fails to see this and will not accept this line of questioning.
Your Honor, the prosecution believes that the private dreams of this man would speak volumes to his mental state, and I think that if the defense is arguing that this man should be allowed to roam the streets while armed and under the defense of the law, we should be well aware of his mental state and it should be established in court.
Objection, improper expert opinion on the medicinal fact of mental state due to dreams being used to interpret character.
I will add to evidence. He reaches into his briefcase and pulls out a signed paper. This is the waiver signed by the defendant upon entering the seer, as well as the seer's written opinion on the back. I'll let this into evidence as a...
Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution cannot introduce new evidence into the trial after the trial has already
Objection, Your Honor. This was established. It is written in the rules of court section.
All right. Also, I'm going to. I'm also going to object to the evidence improper expert opinion, as seers are not exactly trusted mental scientists.
As magic is a proven fact in this world,
and not an exact science.
I do not wish to establish the seer's opinion on the dreams. I simply wish to establish what the content of them were, as I believe the gratuitousness of them would relate heavily to this case.
All right. Given the freshly reviewed rules of court, the defense withdraws their objection.
Very well. And he pulls it out. I will... Marshall, if you could please recount these...
James, we can't hear
what was said in the event. James is not talking.
Can y'all hear me right now, or no?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Marshall, if you could please recount the events that were mentioned in the dream. The Marshal nods. From my recollection, and also from the waiver here, the dreams that John Reid had were always violent. You would often wake up screaming after every morning, every time you went to bed. The original ones, as mentioned, were involving him seeing the faces of all those he killed before them killing him and himself being buried in a grave, as well as a number of added steps between there, such as seeing his lost love or killing his current party members. I will add those were. I'm no expert on dream logic, so I cannot actually attest to that. And the Rhodes says, those are some interesting dreams that Fenn has had here, involving the death of many of his victims as well as the fantasy of killing others.
Objection, opinion. The prosecution cannot assume that these are fantasies. In fact, probably the opposite is the case, considering that the defendant wakes up.
This is
The
also
defendant
opinion.
wakes up screaming. The defendant wakes up screaming. These dreams are clearly not pleasant experiences for him. They are not fantasies. And unless the prosecution can prove otherwise, the defense will not accept that.
True point.
Rhodes kind of like nods at that and steps back a little. Very well defended. I cannot prove to the defendant's mental state upon, or what his particular emotions were upon having these dreams. The only thing that can be stated is that these dreams are repeated, oftentimes the same ones every night, as he would frequently recount them to the marshal, written in his notes, as well as to other members of the party, and just random passers-by sometimes. The case with the seer in particular was
That was
actually,
a lie.
That is true, actually.
You did, buddy.
I'll add. Okay, back in character. The prosecution will state in the marshal's notes are multiple listed occasions where he would share these dreams, or describe them unsolicited to passers-by, including the marshal, other members of the party, Deathblade, and one Eddie Owens, who is not present in court at this time, but is another member of the defense counsel.
Thank you for being specific. Thank you.
In the situation involving the seer in particular, I believe it was a separate dream. Marshall, if you would comment on that. Marshall nods. Yes, that dream in particular, it seemed to be what Mr. Reid described as a dread of coming to this court, of being essentially entering this court before drowning and being pulled apart by many hands underwater. I will say he did not wake up screaming in these ones. Well, I cannot speak to that, but that is interesting.
Your Honor,
yes.
before I do that, I whisper Joe. Should I tell him a more specific part about that dream?
No. You're not on the stand right now, buddy. You can't do that.
Okay. All right. My apologies.
I would ask the defense and the defendant to please keep their comments to themselves during this testimony.
Yeah.
Your Honor, no further questions for the man on stand here, Marshal Carlson. And Rhodes steps back behind his desk. Carlson kind of nods at the group and then leaves. The prosecution would like to call to stand their final witness.
Go crazy.
The prosecution calls to the stand one Joseph Donnelly.
Uh-oh. Little twisty.
The prosecution acknowledges that this would normally not be proper conduct given the lawyer's oath, but given our previous discussion with the judge about possible pre-existing circumstances that could have illegally elicited this.
I'll allow it.
this
Your
position.
objection, Honor. This is a court about me, myself. How does Joseph Donnelly have anything to do with this?
And Your Honor,
that will be proven in testimony.
Your Honor,
Okay.
I would also like to state that should I say anything that incriminates my client, that is a direct breach of attorney-client privilege. Me providing witness testimony may compel me to break the law.
Your Honor, I have just gone over this in detail with both yourself and also a number of other legal sources. The defendant and the lawyer-client privileges can be revoked in extenuating circumstances. To provoke the lawyer to testify on events that were known prior to the being brought on as official counsel.
Your Honor, how can the defense expect to cross-examine the witness if the only one capable of cross-examining is, in fact, the witness?
You will have to choose another from your defense counsel.
Yeah, sort of an understudy situation.
Mr. Donnelly, if you would please take the stand.
John, grabs his hand, do you want this, John? And he whispers this to, Joe.
And, Joe, looks at him and, slaps his hand away.
And Rhodes kind of steps out to where you normally will interrogate the witness. Testify if you please take the stand.
Joe stands up, adjusts his tie, and
sprints out of the room. Alright. Yeah, you take the stand. Mr. Donnelly, pleasure to finally have you at the stand here. I would like to ask you some questions relating to your time in Alchemist Town. So, you have made it aware in prior testimonies with Mr. Reid, as well as with Ms. Barrett, that there was a confrontation had in Alchemist Town between yourself and Mr. Reid. Could you please elaborate on that? Yes. As the details are currently sparse.
After I became aware that Mr. Reid committed a crime in Gold Throne, I told them to meet me in a clearing at the north of Alchemist Town. After that,
to clarify, apologies, you may continue in a minute. To clarify, you are aware of the crime committed in Gold Throne, but chose to not inform law enforcement.
I was.
Wait, never mind, take that back.
Is there a particular reason for this?
I was in fear for my life.
Elaborate on that.
I approached the marshal's office in Gold Throne after learning the crime. However, upon approaching the marshal's office, Steel Survivor came up behind me and told me
the defendant by his actual name, not by his alter ego.
The defendant came up behind me and told me not to tell anyone.
Was there a threat of violence?
That was implied, yes.
Objection, speculation. Never mind. Damn it! You already spoke.
No, that's a good objection. That's a good objection.
I'll let it stand.
Your Honor, permission to treat the witness as hostile.
At this point, Joe is grinning at Governor Rhodes.
And Rhodes,
by the way,
I'll allow it.
Napi, as you can see, Joe has been called to the stand as the prosecution's final witness, just to keep you in the loop.
I'll allow it.
Now, you say Mr. Reid threatened your life. Continue the story after that point.
I did. I told John Reid then to meet me in a clearing at the north of Alchemist Town. After this, I told him that he needed to cut the crap, stop doing what he was doing, and become the man that I knew he could be. After that, he buried his guns, fired a shot at them to symbolize killing Steel Survivor, and wrote his name on a tree stump that he buried them near.
The same tree stump under which no weapon was found after repeated investigations.
The defense is going to ask that the
Ask and
judge cast
answer.
zone of truth so that the same question can be reiterated so that the truth of the matter can be actually ascertained.
Sure. Give
I don't know
you
if we
the
want
truth.
truth. I don't think we want
Too late. I did it.
Fuck.
Can't uncast it.
We've got 10 minutes of
allows-
truth.
The
If the prosecution allows it.
The prosecution will allow this.
All right.
Very well.
Mr. Reid, if you could repeat your previous statement.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Donnelly.
Mr.
Repeat
Donnelly.
The previous statement.
I took him to a grove, a clearing north of Alchemist Town. I told him to cut the crap, stop doing what he was doing, and become the man that I needed him to be. He then subsequently buried his weapons, fired a shot at them, and then marked his name on a tree stump that he buried them near. That is the truth. I will repeat it as many times as needed.
And after this event, why did you not inform any law enforcement of his involvement in the crime of Mr. Barrett's death? I'm allowed to ask leading questions as the witness is hostile.
That's true. We
got
said
it.
that. We said it. We said it. We said it. So you
As
can do
has been
that.
established with all of my witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to actually give him a chance to change and to do the thing that I asked him to do.
And
I couldn't.
Was there any? Continue. Apologies.
He couldn't do that if I turned it in. If I turned him in.
Was there any other reason you chose to not turn him in?
Objection calls for speculation.
No.
This is not speculation. I am asking the witness to testify to potential motives he might have had for concealment of
Oh wait,
this
relevance.
crime.
Relevance. How is this relevant to me?
Actually,
this is
yeah,
relevant.
that is
Your Honor,
that.
I'm
you explain
under
the
impression
relevance?
that Mr. Donnelly here was under direct compulsion to not tell this secret. And I would like confirmation while he's under zone of truth that this is not the case, or that it is the case.
Well, I can actually answer that. After Mr. Reid elected to turn over a new leaf that night in Alchemist Town, I no longer felt under compulsion from him. I didn't feel any threat of violence from him.
So there was no other pressing reason for you to not share his crimes with the world, despite being contacted by multiple law enforcement agencies,
There,
the U.S. Marshal and Jay Barrett.
Objective narrative.
This is not narrative. This is asking a simple question.
I was slightly concerned for my reputation. I've built up a following over the past years that from helping people around Briarstone and helping people throughout the mountains. I was concerned that people would think less of me for giving John a second chance.
I'm sorry.
You were concerned people would think less of you for giving him a second chance.
Yes.
And for that reason, you knowingly chose to conceal a criminal,
Well,
aiding and abetting after the fact.
Well, that reason and the reason that I just outlined to you, that I actually did want to give him a second chance that I offered him. Yes.
Do you not believe in the court's ability to determine his guilt and whether or not he deserves a second chance?
Yeah.
I believe that up until that point, John Reid didn't really get any opportunity to prove what type of man he could be. Any trial that really would have happened at that time would have been an incomplete evaluation of his character.
Mr. Reid had years to prove his character. You believe that the actions in the past 2 months have overridden all of that?
Objection, speculation.
I'm simply asking the defendant.
You're asking what they believe, which is in
Yes.
fact speculation.
I'm asking for his reasoning in concealment of a crime, and to further explain why he chose to do so.
Then please ask that.
True.
Very well. Mr. Donnelly, as you are clearly a well-educated man, what made you believe that at that time his 3 years of past crimes could be overridden or should be overridden by a number of good deeds in the future, which led to your concealment of his involvement in this initial murder?
Objection, compound question.
This is a single question which the defense has asked me to elaborate further on.
I'm sorry. What you're asking me is why. Okay, so there are a few things that are going on here. You assume that I had intimate knowledge of all. Thank you, Your Honor. Got it.
Nice.
You assume that I had intimate knowledge of all of Mr. Reid's past misgivings, when in reality, the only crime that I really knew about, that I was really aware of, was his murder of Duke Barrett. That was the only one.
You state you had infinite knowledge of his past lack of chances, despite only having known him for roughly a week at that time. You believe that overweighed the known crime he committed, as well as, and he pulls out the list of crimes against: the assault on one former General Mustard, the poor treatment of 3 captives, the attempted execution of those captives. You believe all of that was circumstantial and relevant?
No. But I still haven't fully elaborated on the circumstances of why I gave him the second chance.
Then please do.
I was in fear for what Mr. Reid could do. I felt that offering him a second chance was one of the only ways in my capacity that I could stop him from doing further damage.
You didn't believe the court could stop him, or any sort of law enforcement agency could stop him from doing further damage.
Speculation. Call for speculation.
Mr. Donnelly, could you please continue your line of questioning? The call for is not relevant, as this will establish character, as is very relevant in this trial.
I still do object to the relevance of this line of questioning. The only thing that you have established...
I believe your reasoning for concealing this
Governor.
crime is very relevant.
Governor, just a second. I've already established that I gave him a second chance because I feared for my life. That plenty establishes the character that you need in your case. Now you are solely questioning on what my further reasons for concealing it were, and that is not relevant. My personal reasons after that are my own personal reasons. I'm not under trial here.
Mr.
He's not?
You seem far more talkative now that Zone of Truth has passed.
Objection,
Very well.
speculation.
Yeah, that was.
If you look at it, if we were to look at your word count before and after, I believe we could find. That's neither here nor there, though. I'll move on to another line of questioning.
Thank you, Governor.
Now, there have been several mentions of a schism that appeared between yourself and Mr. Reid while you were in White Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
While we have gotten several confirmation on this, we have not actually heard from either side what the actual topic of this was. Could you please describe what caused this schism?
I was unwilling to provide information about my past to the defendant, and the defendant did not like this.
And I suppose you would not be willing to provide this past now in court.
No.
Very well, very well. You are under no obligation to do so.
I'm aware.
But I should ask, was it only this that caused Mr. Reid to become so aggravated?
Okay. To the best of my recollection, yes, that was the main reason.
So it was primarily the fact that he could not get you to answer a single question about your history.
Yes, I believe what he said was, you've done so much to help me grapple with my past, and you won't let anyone grapple with yours.
I see. And how long have these issues been ongoing?
Between the defendant and me?
Yes.
A few weeks now, but they largely seem to have settled. I've been under the impression, for at least the past few days, that the defendant has been fully willing to let sleeping dogs lie when it comes to private information about myself.
I see. Now, according to court record here, as well as the marshal's notes, the two of you were not speaking for roughly a week. Is that correct?
Yes, that sounds correct. There was quite a large rift in between us at the time. It was a very stressful time.
And aside from you not sharing this information, there was no other reason for this rift to occur. You had done nothing to aggravate him or to incite his ire.
As far as I'm aware, no. This was an issue that John felt very strongly about. He could see that my past was something that I had to bear, and he didn't like that I had to bear it alone.
And during this time, were you ever under the fear for your life?
During this time, no, not at all. We had gone far past that point.
Despite you having witnessed his multiple violent outbursts?
Oh, yes, there were multiple times during this time where John Reid had actually saved my life. And at that point, I figured, you know what, if he wanted me dead, he would have just let me die.
Interesting. So you were aware of all these violent outbursts you'd had, aware of the many crimes you committed since this point, the multiple snakebite gang members have been shot, and at no point were you even concerned for your well-being.
No, not at all.
All right. One final question for you, Mr. Donnelly. For what reason did you conceal your persona?
Objection, relevance.
Objection, relevance. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really, really not relevant to the current situation.
They seem pretty certain of that.
It could prove relevant, considering the fact
Objection,
that
speculation.
I'll let him cook for another sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Considering the fact that all records of one Plateau Joe before this trial have you as a bumbling do-gooder strolling through the mountains covered in dirt with moss on his beard.
I object. I object
Objection,
to
narrative.
the. I object to the characterization bumble.
Let the record show he's bumbling.
Mr. Donnelly, could you kindly speak in your Plateau Joe voice, the cadence that most of us would recognize you for?
Of course.
Well, howdy there. My name's Plateau Joe.
Please have the stenographer underline and bold the phrase bumbling.
Yeah, objection, hearsay.
You thar said that you needed a guide through the mountains? I'd be happy to lend a hand.
I find it mighty suspicious that this persona was only dropped in relation to Mr. Reid here. And I would like any confirmation on why that was.
Objection, argumentative.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty that the demonstration that you just asked me to undertake is pretty, self-explanatory as to my reasons why I dropped that persona. It isn't exactly very conducive to a good court appearance now, is it?
Objection, argumentative. My Governor Rhodes is bullying my Mr. Donnelly.
I don't feel bullied.
I'm allowed to ask argumentative questions with the witnesses.
He's a hostile witness.
Yeah, and don't worry, John. I don't really feel bullied right now. I mean,
okay.
I think I said a lot of things that this guy didn't expect me to say.
You're allowed to bully people.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Sometimes they suck.
Your Honor, I would
actually is
request
a
permission.
objection. I found out.
Your Honor, I would request permission to inquire deeper into Mr. Donnelly's past, under the presumption that this being concealed, as it clearly was concealed before this trial.
Objection, relevant.
Objection.
How does his past affect my future? My present.
This case.
In order for that to happen, you would need to give more evidence. You would need to find more evidence, Governor, and that's not something that you have time to do. This is the last day of the trial.
Yeah, I'm with them on this one, I think. Let's keep that option on the table, but for now, continue and let the defendant's motion stand.
Given the witness's refusal to testify further to these actions, I will yield the witness to the defense counsel. Thank the door.
Okay, let's get this party back on the roll.
Okay.
Fred's your witness.
All right. How did you meet the defendant?
Objection, Your Honor. Patroculus is not a legal U.S. citizen. I do not believe he could act as a prime defense here.
Now,
Very well,
okay.
Your Honor. Do you want me to?
Your Honor, I would also like to remind the court that John Reid has a right to not act in his own defense. Currently, the only individual who is not on the stand, who is not him, who is part of the defense team, is Patroculus Knight. To deny Patroculus Knight the right to cross-examine would be to deny my client's constitutional rights.
Another defense attorney could potentially be found, but I do believe Mr. Knight here is a citizen of Britain, not of the United States. As such, cannot be called to act as a lawyer.
And the state failed to provide a suitable defense lawyer, and thus we had to come up with our own. And as a result, I am all that is left.
I would also like to question why the prosecution has been allowing Mr. Patroculus' objections to be heard this entire court, and is instead waiting for the last possible minute, when it would be most damaging to my client's case, to deny him the opportunity to act like the lawyer that he has been acting like the whole time.
If you could please remain quiet while the lawyers do discussing here. I believe that acting as a part of the council poses no issue in terms of the legality of the matter, but as he is a foreign citizen, calling on him to be the primary attorney is not within the bounds of the law.
But I'm not the primary attorney. I am the acting primary attorney, in lieu of the absence that you induced upon the defense.
This is You're the reason that we're in this situation, Governor. If you didn't want this to happen, then you should not have called me.
Be that as it may, Mr. Patroculus is not suited to testify, I would ask. He's not suited to act as a lawyer. I would ask that you either refer to another member of your defense counsel or allow us to find a public
Your Honor, I ask to strike the entire testimony of Joseph Donnelly if there is no capability for a cross-examination due to the violation of the defendant's rights.
Full capability of cross-examination here. The defense counsel is refusing either a public defendant
and
or
the prosecution is refused to provide a proper defense citizen who can act as a defense coordinator.
If they would allow me, I could acquire a legal defender. It would take me about merely 15 minutes of going outside to find one.
A willing legal defender.
Yes. If the council is unwilling to provide one of their members,
Objection, Your Honor.
Mr. Illanapi has left.
The judge feels like there's a lot of objections happening, and the judge will at some point have to leave because the judge has shit to do. So here's the thing. I don't care.
Your Honor, may I ask questions acting as the leading defense counsel?
Yeah, sure, whatever. Go crazy, kid.
Very well.
With the judge's consent, we will abide by this flagrant disrespect of our laws.
Ultimately, the judge's word is the true interpretation of the law in this courtroom at this time. How did you meet the defendant?
I encountered the defendant on a riverboat when I was guiding Patroculus Knight and Illanapi through the mountains on the way to the abandoned village where General Mustard lives.
And what did he do upon first meeting you? And the rest of your associates?
Not much. We kind of came into contact with each other during a fight with Snakebite gang members. This was, I'm pretty sure, detailed in Jade Barrett's report. After that, he accompanied us to the dead village because he was heading there.
Did you lethally or non-lethally subdue the assailants engaging in illegal criminal activity?
Objection, leading question.
We didn't kill them. No, we turned them in alive for bounties.
Why are you defending the defendant despite your past contentions with him?
I have an awful lot of skin in the game. I didn't come this far and didn't see John make this much progress to see him hang.
And how long have you known the defendant?
3 months.
3 months. And so he has made significant leaps and bounds in character development over 3 months.
Yes.
Under your guidance, it's safe to assume that the answer to this question is the same as has been indicated before, that the defendant has exhibited behavior that elicits personality improvement since he met you.
Objection asked and answered.
Sure.
Sustained. So, do you believe...
I say that. Sustained.
You haven't been saying it is the thing.
Shut up! You're not sustained, and I zap him a little.
You have the soundbite. Use it, Your Honor. Do you believe the defendant, John Reid, is a changed man from who he was? is a changed man from who he was when he killed Duke Barrett.
Absolutely.
What were your initial?
Objection!
Yes. I let that one stand.
What were your initial actions after learning of John's involvement in the death of the Duke?
As I stated previously in my testimony, I attempted
asked and answered.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Please tell the court what the interaction between General Mustard and John Reid was like from your perspective.
Awkward as all hell. John insulted some of General Mustard's friends, insinuated that they had a role in the friendly fire incident during the Battle of the Oasis, and then he inexplicably asked General Mustard for his daughter, Honey Mustard's hand in marriage. I have no idea. I still to this day have no idea what he was thinking then.
Okay. The defendant stands accused of harassing royalty, in particular one General Mustard. If the former General Mustard has been banished from Briarstone and stripped of his titles, is he still considered royalty?
No.
Objection, Your Honor. Royal by blood.
He's still banished and no longer royalty.
He no longer holds active position, but is still royal by blood. Might I add, excuse me, I'm saying too much.
Very well. Okay. You were also involved with the defendant in the burial of the virus-ridden train.
Yes.
And from your interactions with the town near the train and your exploration of said train, would you say that the burial of the train and the various defenses around it were adequate enough?
Objection. Witness is not an expert, cannot testify to the adequacy of the defenses.
The witness had a first-hand account of all the defenses.
I've got two hands.
I can't object. I can't comment as to the adequacy of the defenses, although I will state that the plug sealing up the entrance to the train could be moved by a donkey and the strength of several men. It wasn't that difficult to move.
So that is how the party entered the train. They used one donkey and the strength of a few people.
Relevance.
I also failed to see the relevance.
This testimony will deal to show the inadequacy and how poorly the national security threat of this virus was contained, despite the royal decree indicating that it was of utmost importance and that the train in and of itself be kept hidden and suppressed, and the suppression was done poorly.
Objection, Your Honor. Misstating of evidence. The train was buried 100 feet under the ground with a concrete plinth on top.
And a hollow tube straight to the train.
Ooh, a hollow tube.
With a ladder to climb.
With a ladder?
There were
or up. Ladders go both ways.
Within the train at the time of its burial, there was no anticipation of something exiting until people were to enter it.
Why was the hollow cavity leading straight to the train not filled after?
Filled.
Like John just taps Pat, like Pat, try to get back on track, man. Come on.
All right.
The decrees of the royals are not in question here. I do not see the relevance of this line of questioning.
It's like a guy at a town hall who gets very worked up.
Did the party do a better job of burying the train and saving the area from the national threat than the U.S. government?
Objection, leading question, and not
the witness is hostile, and thus can be asked leading questions.
The witness can only be asked leading questions by those that declare him hostile. He is not your witness. You cannot declare him hostile.
You've declared him hostile already.
I'm not I'm not able
A
to.
witness is only hostile when they are testifying against the party that called them to stand. Currently,
That's
he is
correct.
not.
Don't make me
As
zap
so
you.
helpfully pointed out yourself, Patroculus.
Yeah, I'm not able to comment on how adequately or inadequately the disease was contained.
Your Honor,
Yes.
is it okay if I take over questioning for a little bit?
The defendant
yeah.
does have the legal right to represent himself in court.
Sure.
Yeah, Joe looks towards Pat and like gives him a nod, like, yeah, let him go. Let him cook.
The judge gently slides a mask over to the table.
And John grabs the mask. Goes, do I need to put this on during my line of questioning, or?
Yeah, you need to put it on. Yeah, you need to put it on.
He puts it on.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's
so
important.
we've already understand your motive for why you wish to accompany John Reid to throughout the course of the 2 months. And through your observations, you say he has changed.
Yes.
Can you provide us with some examples of how he has changed?
Oh, God. There are quite a few. He puts his life on the line for others quite regularly now. He doesn't hide behind his steel survivor persona. He cooperates with law enforcement.
Hey, is the courtroom next to us busy?
Cavan, we can definitely.
Apologies.
Yes, he.
There's a domestic dispute occurring in the courtroom next to us. We will endeavor to remain quiet. I will go in and quiet them right now.
It's one of those celebrity trials. It's a big thing.
Yes, he puts his life on the line for others quite frequently. Now he cooperates with law enforcement. He has faith. He has a faith in the justice system and a desire to prove himself through it. He actually listens to people now. He didn't really used to do that before. He wants to make sure that you're okay, even if you don't want to talk about why you're not. Those are just some of the things that I can think of. And he gives bad people second chances because someone gave him a second chance.
And I believe Mr. Rhodes has gone on to a little bit of this with regards to the dreams that he has had. Do you know the reasoning to why he goes to these soothsayers and others to interpret his dreams?
Objection. Witness is not an expert in this and cannot speculate.
Very well. I shall rephrase my question. In your opinion, what's your speculation?
Objection. Opinions.
My apologies.
As has been stated by this court, this is not opinion. We do not run law based on that.
Very well. We shall ask about the character. So the character, you say he has saved your life. Can you please recount that time?
Yes. Specifically, there were a few dicey moments in the infected train that he got me out of. In Middleton, when we were escaping, we were accosted by, as the defendant has said, several very high-ranking members of the Snakebite gang. One of them in particular was constricting and crushing me to I was nearly dead, and Mr. Reid intervened, and the snakebite gang member, her name was Boa, began attacking him instead of me, and that allowed me to that saved my life specifically.
Okay. And you said that he has also gave other people a second chance. Can you elaborate further on that, please?
Yes, when he learned of Deathblade's past involvement in the Snakebite gang, but that he had left. The defendant did not hesitate to welcome Deathblade into the party. He treated him as almost like a family member, and part of this was their shared camaraderie during the war with the barbarians and against, and then the snake clearing operations. But even though he had been fighting the Snakebite gang for a very, very long time, he didn't hesitate to treat Deathblade like a human, when I'm sure many other individuals wouldn't have.
See, and we can go on with all the other deeds that John Reid has done, but I will skip to that with his. He is very compliant with the law, I believe you said, quote, and...
Objection, speculation.
Agreed.
Okay. Very well. I'll get to it, my apologies. During your time you've seen him with the Marshal, has he ever acted aggressive or hostile towards any member of the Briarstone government?
Of the Briarstone government?
Of the Briarstone government.
No, not to my recollection. He did get a little antsy and angry with us, the people he was familiar with, but not to any member of the Briarstone government. No.
Okay.
Also,
has John Reid told you why he has changed, the reason why he decided to leave this supposed Steel Survivor persona?
Not directly, but there are... I have observed a constant thread of his actions relating to one Honey Mustard.
Can you please elaborate further?
Yes. Mr. Reid has been very adamant on showing that he is a good man for her sake. He mentions her very often, and he wants to be worthy of the love that she has given him in the past, and hopefully, and he hopes, a relationship they will have in the future.
And how does he...
Leading question.
How does this lead? I just wish to know, how is he showing this?
I'll allow it.
How is he shown that he's fighting to be a good man for Honey Mustard?
Yes.
Well, those rings that he purchased in Gold Throne were... One was supposed to be for him, one was supposed to be for her. He's kept those all this time.
And let the evidence show of this, and he takes out his pocket, shows out the 2 rings.
One ring to rule them all. One ring to bind.
The defendant is not supposed to have any personal effects on him while he was incarcerated.
I levitate them over to me.
Your Honor.
This was cleared with the law in advance, and they allowed this.
Indeed. Indeed.
I am the law.
Upon his arrest, the inquiry
Thank you,
was
Judge
made,
Dredd.
and he was allowed to keep them while imprisoned.
Indeed. Anyways, resume, Mr. Donnelly.
That's the main one.
Mm.
That in addition to him, and Joe gives like a wry smile. That in addition to him being unable to shut up about her most of the time.
Okay.
Simple.
So Mr. Reed's
Guilty
doing all
as
this
charged.
stuff. Oh, okay, I'm back in character now. Okay. So he's doing all this for love and blah 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 blah.
Right.
And but that still doesn't explain the fact. Why are we in court? Like he is in charge for all this stuff.
Objection, relevance of speculation, primarily.
Pick one.
The defense lawyer cannot just ruminate.
That's
On this
true.
current
I hate
My apologies.
ruminating.
My apologies. I will refrain from using the word.
We're not
blah,
gonna let him
blah,
cook.
blah.
The sacred oven is off limits.
I shall refrain from using blah blah blah.
And
Anyways,
if I might say, we do know why you're in court, John. I mean, you did kill a man.
Yes. Yes.
He
I
did?
So, but why are we in court when this usually should be a simple like, oh, put to death. Why are we here?
Are we supposed to answer?
Is this
Yes.
the question that you want me to answer?
Yes,
John?
please.
Objection, is this a rhetorical question?
I don't.
No,
I don't
like-
think it is. Well,
Objection,
you are.
can you please rephrase the question to make the
Um,
question more clear?
okay, my apologies. Then, why are we here, trying to determine what Mr. Reed's punishment should be?
Well, I mean, a lot of that is you. You haven't resisted arrest, so no one's had any excuse to kill you so far. You deserve a chance to represent yourself in court and to explain your actions and to show everyone who you are. Those are a few of the reasons. Mostly we're here because you wanted to be here. Because every single time you've been asked to come back to Briarstone for the trial, you've said yes.
Let the record state that defendant just here said that that Mr. Reed wishes to be in court, not because he was caught, but because he wanted to
Objection,
be
speculation.
trial.
The defendant is not on the stand right now, and the current witness cannot speculate to his internal thoughts.
Very
True.
well.
Strike that from the record.
Very well. Very well. Apologies. This is my first time in court.
Me too.
That much is clear.
Right. Mine too.
Me too.
And
Am I the only one who has been in court before?
indeed.
Whatever. Continue.
And this is prosecution. Would you wish for you to call objection for speculation for me asking Mr. Well, nah, I'm not gonna. You'll hear it and you'll understand it. Mr. Dahman, do you believe John Reid has shown everyone what type of character he has today?
Today?
Or my apologies, during the course of this trial?
I do think he has.
Very well then. No questions, Your Honor. Mr. Donnelly, you may return to your seat. That's Joe. Sure, like you did good. You did really good.
And Pat's gonna hand him a rag to wipe off his sweaty hands.
Yeah. So, Your Honor, where do we go from after this?
Closing statement.
Closing statements.
Closing statements. Okay.
Beyond that is up to your faith. Oh, yeah. Governor Rhodes, closing statement.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we've all heard a lot of things here today. We've heard the many crimes of the defendant and the evidence supporting more. We've seen the defendant's predisposition to violent outbursts, feats of passion, and zealous following of his obsessions. We have also heard the defense attempt to reframe these as the acts of a good man, and attempt to suppress any thought to the contrary. I ask you that you today vote based solely on the facts presented here, and on your own innate belief in what is right, as deep down we all know what is truly within the law today, that this man is guilty. Thank you. The prosecution rests its case.
Like, yeah, I said, call Donnelly, get up there. Gotta do everything around here, Jesus.
Who the heck is that?
Members
my dad.
of the
Masking, just the mask.
Members of the jury, over the course of this trial, you have heard much testimony, and a few things are clear. 1. Mr. Reid, the defendant, was not always a good man. Many of his actions cannot be explained away if he is good. Many of his actions cannot be explained away as justified or justifiable. However, one other thing that testimony and evidence has shown is that Mr. Reid took several proactive steps to change, and that has demonstrated progress as a human and a man. Members of law enforcement that have interacted with him have deputized him, have enlisted him in law enforcement efforts, have seen his skill in combat demonstrated against those who would do this city harm. They believed that John could be of use. The defense believes that John can be of use. And you should too. John will have to bear the consequences of his actions for the rest of his life. We don't know if he'll ever be able to reunite with the woman that loved him. We don't know if people are ever going to look at him the same way again. But what we do know is that John Reid can help. And that John Reid must help. Because if he doesn't, then all this society has is a dead man. Nothing more. The defense asks you to, as the prosecution asks you, view the evidence and testimony in its entirety. To view John Reid in his entirety. Not just the part that is inconvenient to him, but his actions, his deeds, the friendships that he has made, that show him the type of man that he is right now and the type of man that he can be for this city. And if you do that, the defense is sure that you will put John Reid to service in this city. Not because he is asked to do it, but because he must do it to account for his actions and his mistakes of the past. But if you do that, if you let John Reid continue the good trajectory that he is on right now, I can guarantee you that you will not be disappointed by the mark that he can still leave on this world and on the lives of every single Briarstonian. Thank you. The defense rests.
Sounds good. Good job, everyone.